makes sense, most transparent. Yeah.
Speaking of judges, hello, Alex. You're still muted, but.
And William gets the A for effort for the Ravens jersey for tonight's meeting.
I got purple on.
There you go.
You know what? Do I need to change? Like, what's
No, it is
No,
perfect.
keep it on.
No.
It is
Might
bring luck.
perfect.
This
Perfect.
is for the judge. He gets the opportunity to see what real Maryland football looks like tonight versus what happened.
Oh.
So in my household, because I married a man from Buffalo, we are Buffalo Bills fans.
Oh, that's a
We
shame.
were in Buffalo this weekend and went to the game yesterday. And anyone who follows football and who perhaps watched that game knows that it was not a happy occasion and that there's no joy in Fleckenstein House today. So.
Not a happy day for Ravens fans. They didn't help us.
Right.
Well, I think Jonathan and I are Eagles fans. I know I am. Jonathan, you're from the Philadelphia area.
I enjoyed yesterday's game.
Yeah, wasn't that nice? Yeah.
Okay.
We have a lot of Steelers fans out here in Western Maryland too.
Our Spanish translator, interpreter, I'm sorry, has joined us. I'm going to go ahead and start that for you. You'll receive that link and be able to start that live as soon as we start the meeting. So to our Spanish interpreter who has joined us, I'm going to start that now for you. All right. All right.
Welcome, Cheryl. Welcome, Professor Priscilla.
Hello, good evening.
Hello. And I have a question. Did anyone speak with Jay Amin? Do you know whether he's had a chance to review last week's or the video? Or
I am not sure.
I did not speak with him, but he came on late to the meeting.
Oh, he did
I
come
believe.
on late. Oh, good.
Yeah,
Okay.
he did. I didn't know that till we were ending. Then I saw his name.
Okay. So
to the attendee, Laverne Scott, who has your hand raised, the raise your hand feature is really not being used as a methods of engaging for questions. We ask that you send a message in the chat feature to us so we can acknowledge what you're looking to have us answer. We did have the chat live in the past, and we were noticing some individuals not posting appropriate things in the chat. And so we took the chat feature, making that live for everyone. We also had some individuals posting links that were promotional links for self-promotion, which we didn't want to have as well. But we can certainly have that conversation if you'd like us to have that chat box be live for everyone.
as it stands tonight, people who enter things in the chat box, the hosts and the panelists will see it, but the other members of the audience will not see it.
Correct, but every panelist sees the chat screen.
Okay. Welcome, Kim.
So I'm not sure. I think Jay is not able to join again tonight, or will be joining late. So whenever you guys are ready to start, we are ready. We are recording live, and the Spanish interpretation is available. and the closed captioning is live as well.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. This is the latest public meeting and working meeting of the Maryland Citizens Redistricting Commission. We have I believe, a very short number of comments from the public on maps, and I guess we can start, as we usually do, by introducing ourselves for those who may be new in the audience. I'm Walter Olson. I'm one of the co-chairs of the commission. I live in Frederick County, and my day job is with a think tank in DC.
I'm Kate Hetherington. I am president of Howard Community College. I'm one of the co-chairs of the commission, and I'm a resident of Howard County.
Yes, good afternoon. I'm Alex Williams, co-chair, and I'm a retired judge, and I'm from Prince George's County.
Jay is not here at the moment. That leaves Cheryl next.
I just jumped in.
Oh, Jay, hello.
How are you? Hi, Jay Amin. I'm from Anne Arundel County, and I'm also involved with home building and development in the DC metro region.
Good evening. I'm Cheryl Brooks. I'm an elementary school principal in Baltimore County and a resident of Baltimore County.
Hello, I'm Mary Clausen. I'm a retired federal employee and I reside in Anne Arundel County.
Hi, I'm Kim Cummings, a long-term resident of the Maryland's Eastern Shore, currently residing in Dorchester County, where I'm a circuit court employee specializing in land records and licensing.
I am Jonathan Fussfield. I'm a resident of Montgomery County. I'm a communications manager for a research firm that has government contracting.
Good evening, William Thomas. I am a systems engineer for the Department of Defense, and I'm also a resident of Baltimore City.
Thank you. Our next item is meeting process and policies. And Kristen, that is the prelude to the public testimony that we're going to be hearing, or is there more to it than that?
Yep, I can go ahead and provide some commentary on that. Good evening again, and welcome to the second public meeting of round 2 of the Maryland Citizens Redistricting Commission. The meeting is being recorded. As we begin, there are a few matters we'd like to share regarding the rules and policies for this evening's meeting, as well as some tips about how to use the Zoom platform. This meeting does offer Spanish interpretation. If you would prefer to listen in Spanish, you merely need to go to the control bar either at the bottom or the top of your screen where it indicates interpretation. Click on that and you will be able to listen in Spanish live if you would prefer. There is a 3-minute allotment for speakers. Once you have about 20 seconds left, a countdown clock will come onto the screen, letting you know that you need to wrap up your remarks. Inappropriate speaking, attire, behavior, or background will result in removal from the meeting without the ability to rejoin. Anyone registering to speak after 6 p.m. last night should also ask to speak in the chat section of this meeting, as we may not have been able to get your name added to the pre-registered speakers list. We also want to remind people that you will not be able to share your screen or any maps, as they must be submitted 24 hours prior to the meeting. So if you had wanted to discuss a map but hadn't submitted that prior to last night, you will not be able to share your screen. If you did not register to speak but want to, again, please use the chat feature in the control bar to send a message that you would like to speak, and also indicate your name and make sure your name is listed properly and the county in which you reside. The raised hand option should not be used in order to request to speak. This is because we have to move each speaker from an attendee status to a panelist status. So we need to be able to do so based on your name being listed properly. And once you do speak, you will be placed back in to the attendee status. You may see a spinning wheel or get a notification. Do not worry, you're just being moved back to an attendee status. from a panelist status. We do want people to realize that the participants list is not public to provide the privacy of those calling in for which their cell phone numbers are listed. Pre-registered speakers will go first, followed by those requesting to speak in the chat section. There may be a short delay once we take you from a chat section attendee to a panelist, and you might see a screen message indicating that the host would like to promote you to a panelist. You need to accept that message by clicking the Join as Panelist button. We'll wait about 5 to 10 seconds for you to join, and please be sure to unmute your microphone and share your screen, and share your video if you'd like to be on camera. Once the speakers are finished, again, you'll be moved back into attendee status. We know this is a lot of information, but we want to assist you in better understanding how the Zoom platform works so that things can go as smoothly as possible this evening. For those of you who did register to speak and want to speak with regard to a map, we do have 2 maps. 2 individuals have registered and identified those maps. We will be sharing our screen, and you can speak about the maps that you registered to speak about. With that, I'd like to go back to our host for this evening's meeting, Commissioner Walter Olson.
Thank you, Kristen. And I'm going to turn it right back to you because I think we can proceed to call the first public speaker. There are only, I think you were saying 2 or 3 who had registered.
Yes, our first speaker, and I don't know if she has not been able to join yet, it doesn't appear, and I did send Vanessa Botdorf from Somerset County an email letting her know that the map submission identification number that she sent doesn't align with any kind of identification number we have, so that and asked her to send that in. So perhaps she'll either join later on, or perhaps tomorrow or next Monday she'll be able to discuss the map submission that she references. Chelsea Sniegowski of Frederick would like to speak. Chelsea, I'm going to make you a panelist now. And Chelsea will be referencing map 1001.
1011?
I'm sorry, 1011. And I just need to share my screen.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, should I get started?
Please do.
Can you guys see the screen?
Yes, we can see map 1011, so
wonderful.
Feel free to go ahead. We can see what you're talking about.
Okay, great. Good evening. My name is Chelsea Sniegowski, and I live in Frederick County. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. I've listened to many of the past meetings and a lot of the testimony that has been given. And using that information, I have created map 1011. So throughout these hearings, there's been many great points and observations. And throughout a lot of the meetings, I've heard the same 2 points. The first one being stop gerrymandering. And the second one is to create congressional districts based off of the counties versus dividing them up into the weird shapes that we have today. As I know you're very well aware, our current congressional map has counties like Anne Arundel County divided up into 4 or 5 different congressional districts. Baltimore County is divided up into 4 congressional districts. And the lines that we have today are just, they're not compact, completely disregard county lines, and do a great disservice to Maryland. The map that I've created, which you can see on the screen, is a congressional district map because that's what I'm very concerned about for our state. And I took 3 things into consideration when creating my map. The first one was county lines. The next was making sure that they weren't in funky shapes. No ink blot tests on this one. And I also took into account the voting districts. And I think that when it comes to redistricting for Maryland, we can all agree that each region of Maryland is very different. Every area has its own lifestyle, its own issues. And my goal was to keep counties and regions as whole as possible. So that way the congressmen and women who will be serving our state will be able to help the needs of their constituents and serve them better. And finally, I just wanted to say thank you for the opportunity to speak and to be able to create a map. And I wish you guys the best in this endeavor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sinigowski. And do any of the commissioners have questions they'd like to ask of Ms. Sinigowski? I have a question that I would like to ask if it's possible, which is I notice in Central Maryland, the district, mostly consisting of Anne Arundel, takes little of Howard, and it looks like two little bits of Prince George's, one around Laurel and one that is a little to the southeast but is not contiguous. Is that correct? Just curious whether I'm reading it right and whether there was a reason to take two small bites instead of one larger one.
I missed half of the question. Could you restate it one more time? I'm sorry.
Sorry. In Central Maryland, the map, the district that is mostly Anne Arundel County, takes a small bite out of Howard, and then it looks to me as if it's taking two small bites out of Prince George's, one around Laurel and one a few miles to the southeast, and it looks as if they're not contiguous with each other. I just wondered if there was a reason to do it that way.
Oh, yeah. So I did notice that as well after I submitted it. For Prince George's County, I mean, that's a county that you have to divide up. And when you look at it, just really just came down to the numbers. For that district, which is District 5 on my map, you did need extra people to get to the 771,000 people.
Okay.
So, yeah.
It was not a grand theory, but thank you for the answer. Are there other questions from commissioners? Okay, I hear none, so thank you very much for your presentation. Kristen,
All
the
right.
next commenter.
And our next speaker is Kashina Cross. I am making you a panelist now. And I will pull up your screen.
Hello, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
very
we
well.
are.
So I was speaking on the map for Prince George's County, and as we're doing the proposed zoning and the moving of borders and lines, we just want to make sure that we are also taking into account the school and redistricting portions, because when particularly with the zonings, we've seen that a lot of our school zone changes have happened in our community. As we look at the bigger, larger picture, then want to make sure that, you know, the equity of the persons that are already here on the ground makes sense when you're changing the zonings around. It is a very good mapping process that I've seen thus far, and the recommendations seem to make sense, but I just want to make sure that I bring that forward, particularly in this case, because we have 2 elementary schools and 1 basic. We have 2 high schools that are associated with our area here in the city of Glenarden, and we just wanted to make sure that as you're doing your zoning and mapping, that you do not additionally add, increase in our tax based on where we're zoned for the purposes of enabling, legislation. So I just wanted to put that out there and make sure that that went on the record. Thank you so much.
Thank you. On the screen at the moment is a map of Prince George's and Anne Arundel. Is that associated with this testimony, or it looks as if it was generated in Maptitude? Okay. And are there any questions from commissioners? Okay, hearing none, thanks for your presentation.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Kristen, are there further public commenters?
I have not, I'm just checking the chat feature. I have not seen anyone sign up to speak in the chat feature. So thus far, no one has signed up to speak in the chat feature. We can certainly leave that open for another couple of minutes. Within the chat, there is also a question with regard to map submission deadlines. And I do want to remind folks that the map submission deadline if you want to provide testimony in which you want to present a map that you've created, then you need to make sure that your map is submitted and we are requesting to speak about that map by noon on Friday the 17th in order for us to have that map prepared by the 20th for us to share it. However, if you want to speak about a map that has already been discussed or is already listed on the website under citizen plan commissions, or as we've just heard, someone discussing a map that the commission has discussed, one of our draft illustrative maps, you can certainly put the link to that map to the website, indicating that that's the map you'd like to discuss, which is what we just handled. So if you want to talk about a map that you are submitting, that map has to be submitted by noon on Friday, September 17th, in order for us to have that map into a PDF and other files in order to share the screen. If you are referencing a map that has already been discussed and you provide a link to it, whether it be a citizen map submission or a map submission that is a draft illustrative map, we'd ask that you get that in by the end of the day on Friday, September 17th. However, if you would like to submit a map and provide written testimony, you have until September 24th, close of business, to provide those maps. So the deadline isn't the 17th. The deadline is the 24th for maps to be submitted. Also want to provide a reminder that once the commission puts their maps out, they have working sessions for the next several weeks, then they will make their maps public during round 3. Members of the public will be able to submit additional maps during that period of time to be able to present and discuss or to be able for the commission to consider prior to voting on final maps. So please bear that in mind as we move forward. And with that,
Kristen, can I
yes.
just ask a question? Are all those rules set forth on the website so everyone will clearly understand that?
So all of that information is on the website. Just want to remind people, whether it's members of the public or members of the commission, that calendar is listed right in the upcoming meeting section of the website. If you just go to website and click on the upcoming meetings or commission meetings and then click upcoming meetings, all of that information is on the calendar that's listed there. The policies and procedures that I kind of read through at the beginning, that is also posted to that site as well. Additionally, just for those who are joining us, who I know have joined several of these meetings and might send emails in about where they can find things, if we discuss something during this meeting, whether it's a map or a document that has been provided us, say, for example, by our expert, we post that under that meeting. And the purpose for that is that we are memorializing what happened at that meeting and what documents are part of that meeting. So if someone goes to review that meeting, they can say, okay, these are the maps, these are the documents that were discussed at that meeting. At which point, and thank you, John, for pulling up that website. So that's where you can find those. One of the things we are going to be adding to the homepage essentially is another link that you can see that John has placed in there, indicating send your comments to the Citizens Commission. That is a new section. We didn't want people to be, we talked about it right at the beginning of this meeting, which is the contact us could be confusing for people if they just want to provide comments based on things you all discussed during these meetings, other meetings, your working meetings, or just somebody wants to make comments as to some of the maps they're looking at. Send your comments to the commission. That will provide a link to the commission email, which is redistricting.commission@maryland.gov. So that will be very prominent on the homepage. We also will have a link so that people, and this is something we've also been discussing, so that people will be able to access all of the maps, the draft illustrative maps. And I actually think that we already have that up, John, don't we? Yes. So as you can see, we've added a link that says draft illustrative maps. And so if someone wants to look at the maps that have been discussed by the commission that our expert has provided us, or if perhaps we start to discuss maps that members of the commission provide to the rest of the group, they will be listed there so that someone can find them easily as well and not just have to go to each individual meeting to find all of those maps. With that, we have not had anyone sign up to provide testimony in the chat section. So do any of you have questions for me that I can answer now, or would you like to move into your working meeting?
Yes, someone mentioned in the chat room a few minutes ago whether minutes will be available on the line on website. I know that there's a video of all of the meetings that they can look at from that standpoint, but they asked the question whether minutes will be available.
So with the open meetings, the fact that we have a video, we don't do minutes of the meeting because the meeting is memorialized with video. However, we also post the minutes of the meeting. We also post a transcript of the meeting, and we also post audio only. So there are 3 different ways for someone to access the information. We do our best after each meeting to kind of go through the closed captioning, because that's what generates the transcript. And sometimes some of the words that we say don't exactly come through on the closed captioning properly. So we do our best to clean that up so something that may seem very out of place makes sense to anyone who would read that document having not watched the meeting. So that is posted as well after each meeting. So the video and audio transcript as well as a written transcript of the meeting is posted.
And Kristen, just to clarify, a moment ago, you seemed to say for a moment that minutes as well as audio and video were available at past meetings, but it's really audio and video in lieu of written minutes, in lieu of someone's summary
Correct.
And transcript. Okay, good. Just
Correct.
clarifying that. Are there other questions for Kristen?
No, Walter, just a comment. I want to thank all of those who submitted maps to us.
Yes.
They've been very, very helpful. I intend to look at all of them and take that into consideration.
It's very good. I believe the latest count is 15 congressional maps and 4 Senate maps. And I can guarantee that there's real use, especially as we head into the Senate maps, but also with the congressional maps. Please, of all 9 commissioners, do take time to review those. And I would propose that for any of them that you would like to discuss more, and maybe the whole map is good, maybe just one corner of the state, it has a good idea for handling one county or one corner. If you could flag that in an email to Kristen or to the chairs, we want to have a list for discussion of, and any of you can nominate any of the maps, but inevitably we can't give a lot of attention. If the number is 30 maps, we can't give a lot of attention to all 30 of them, but we can try to flag the ones that provide interesting ideas for us to talk about. So just think of doing that as you review maps. Not hearing any more questions for Kristen, I wanted to, before we turn to Professor Persili, who's going to be taking us through most of the evening, I had one question I wanted to raise, which is, do people have further thoughts on last week? We made tremendous progress But it may be that we didn't say everything that occurred to us after we hung up. Did people have further thoughts? Or Jay, I hope if you have any questions or any observations, I know that that you need to be just as informed as the rest of us, and we want to make sure that happens. Any comments on last week? Okay, well, in that case, I would like to turn the program over to Professor Persili, who will be touching on a number of things I know we've been wanting to hear about, both issues related to the congressional map, but also introduction to the Senate map, a deeper dive into criteria, because we're going to find as we get into the Senate map that and its issues that it is going to pitch a number of criteria issues at us that we haven't had to deal with very much in the congressional map. So we will be learning about criteria that way too. So Professor Persili, to take it away.
Thanks very much. Could someone enable screen sharing for me? Right now
you should be able to as a panelist.
It's not. It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay. I have not, but let's just see what I can do here.
All right, now it works.
Okay.
All right, great. Wonderful. Thank you, Chair Olson. Thank you to the Commission for having me talk about the Maryland Senate map. I thought there are a lot of different ways I can go. I thought that, and I await your instructions midway, which is I'm going to talk about the different considerations for the Maryland Senate and frankly the House of Delegates map also a little bit. And then I will show you, I will walk through an example plan, not one that I'm advocating for or anything like that, but just to give you a sense of the different considerations as you walk through the map that should be present. And but please interrupt me at any time if I can provide further elaboration or if you want me to go in a different direction, because one of the bottom lines here is that this is a much more complicated and difficult map to draw than the congressional map for the reasons that that should become clear. Not the least of which is that it's 6 times as large in terms of the number of districts. So let me just start by comparing, since now you all are professionals when it comes to congressional redistricting, let me talk about what's different with the Senate plan. First of all is that we can have that constitutionally speaking, we can have a greater population variance of plus or minus 5%. And so the ideal adjusted, again, using the prisoner adjusted data, district population 131,392. And that means that constitutionally we can range from 124,822 to 137,961. And so that allows for some greater flexibility depending on whether you want to take advantage of it. And I'll talk about that in a second. Secondly, we had a lot of discussion about political subdivisions in the congressional map, but as I mentioned there, that's really from the governor's order that you get the political subdivision requirement. When it comes to the state legislature, we actually have case law. That was when I was appointed to draw the remedial plan, whatever it is, 15, 17 years ago. That was because the Court of Appeals had struck down the legislative plan as violating too many county and municipal lines. And so it's a real political subdivision requirement. And in that opinion, they also talk about not crossing the Chesapeake Bay. I won't say that it's completely forbidden because I think that's wrong because it's kind of dicta there, but they do have a lot of language in that opinion about what the kind of framers' intent was behind these provisions and whether the Chesapeake Bay could be crossed in a legislative plan. Last two very important points. The fact that Maryland requires that you have state Senate districts and then you have state House districts that are included within them, either multi-member or single member, is a significant constraint on the plan. It's very difficult because as you're drawing state Senate districts, you need to be aware of what the implications are for the next plan you're going to draw. And so we can't as a body, draw the Senate districts and then draw a separate assembly plan because they have to match up. And that has certain voting rights considerations, which I'll make clear as we go through the map. But it's also just technically kind of difficult because you want to make sure that you can split any given district into 3 equal districts that are contiguous, compact, and the other requirements of the governor's order. We did not really because we respected county lines in that congressional draft. We, even without trying, created 1 majority African American district and 2 that are really close to 50%. That is, there are more complicated considerations at bay when it comes to drawing majority or even just sort of opportunity districts under the Voting Rights Act for African Americans and Latinos. And I'm going to spend a lot of time talking a little bit about the Voting Rights Act tonight in ways that we haven't, in a level of detail we haven't yet. So let me just talk about general considerations as you approach the map, what to think about. The first is, do you want to take advantage of this, the 5% deviation plus or minus? And my recommendation is that at the front end, you should, while you're drafting the map, take advantage of the full 5% because you'll see that it allows you to respect political subdivision lines, do some other things, compactness, even deal with the Voting Rights Act. But then as you refine the map, if you want to adopt a lower population deviation, then you can do it then. The map that I've drawn is originally was drawn to 5%. Now it's down below plus or minus 4%. I'm sure I could get it to plus or minus 3% if necessary. Second, there's sort of some interesting features, geographic features when it comes to thinking about placing Senate districts inside counties. So if you remember last time when we did the congressional map, there was some interest among the commission, like, well, which counties can support one district? And so then, for instance, the Montgomery County plan has Montgomery County having its own district and then just some parts of districts. Similarly, you can divide, you look at counties or groups of counties and say, well, could you draw a perfect number of districts that would fit in within these county lines? And the answer is you can do it in a few places. Montgomery County can be divided up into Senate districts that don't cross lines. Again, this is, leave aside for the moment other legal constraints like the Voting Rights Act and others, but if just for population reasons, you're able to do that. Similarly, with the 4 counties in Western Maryland, up until Frederick, you can do the same thing. And so I'll show you how that, and what I mean by that, it's not that it's going to be 1 Senate district, but it's going to be 4 Senate districts that will be spread out among those 4 counties, but you then don't need to cross into a 5th district. But a lot of the action and difficult decisions have to do with Baltimore and Prince George's County, Baltimore County and Baltimore City, and where you go in and out of those counties. Does the Baltimore City district go into, or one of them, does it go into Anne Arundel County or should it go into Baltimore County? Should a Prince George's County district go into Anne Arundel or Montgomery County or Charles, right? Depending on how you draw it. And so I'll go over each one of the considerations as we go through the map. But I do want to at least start by talking a little bit about the Voting Rights Act and why it's actually, as I've gone through the Maryland map, there are some really difficult and kind of avant-garde Voting Rights Act issues that are at play here. I want to be transparent with you and the public about what the considerations are so that everybody is aware of what we should all be thinking about. There's a threshold question as to how do we figure out or estimate the racial composition of geography, right? And so the census has its race categories, and it allows you to count, there's 6 different racial groups plus being Hispanic or not Hispanic, which is deemed a ethnicity. And that leads to 26 different racial combinations. And then that then was adjusted for the prisoner reallocation. And what Maryland did actually is they used a little bit different racial categories. And it's important to understand that, because as we get criticized, as inevitably happens, about, hey, why is this district 45% or 49% of a particular minority? One of the things that Maryland did, at least in the data that I've received, and maybe I can investigate further, is that it treated, in a sense, Hispanic as being a racial group instead of just an ethnic group, so that it divides the world into Hispanic respondents, non-Hispanic Black, non-Hispanic White, non-Hispanic Asian, and the like. That might seem like a kind of technical thing, but there are a number of Black Hispanics that will affect the African American composite, the reported numbers. That was true in the congressional plan. That's going to be true here as well. I mention this because we really do need to be cognizant of some of these statistical issues when in asking questions about, how well did we do with respect to Voting Rights Act compliance. In addition, there's how we deal with the counting of multiracial individuals. There are specific OMB guidelines on how to do this, and the Department of Justice has issued advisories on that. And like I said, the prisoner adjusted data actually does not comply with them. And so we need to look at all different sources of data at once. Similarly, there's case law that you should look at the citizen voting age population in constructing districts. That is not, of course, in the census data. That would come from certain surveys. And so as we think particularly about Hispanic opportunity districts, understanding the citizen, non-citizen component of that population is really important. How we consider minority coalition districts is the right question to say, as I've been, majority African-American, majority Latino or Latino or African-American opportunity districts, or are there times when we should think of minorities in coalition with each other? That is going to be, that's a very important question. It's sort of on the cusp of voting rights law that I can talk about. But there are a lot of areas in Montgomery County, like Gaithersburg, Rockville, places up in Frederick itself, where it's important to ask the question and to look at not just the individual racial groups, but in coalition, the coalition groups. There are some areas in Prince George's and Montgomery County where there may be trade-offs, where the addition of one Latino majority group or majority minority district may come at the expense of African American district. I think there are ways around that, but I want you to pay attention to that as we go through the map. And then finally, how should we deal with, how much do we want to split political subdivision lines in order to deal with these concerns? Because one thing you'll see is that you can draw, in Baltimore, joining Baltimore City with parts of Baltimore County, as well as Prince George's County with parts of Montgomery, you can actually deal with these voting rights issues relatively easily, but it does come at the expense of political subdivision lines. And so as we go through, you'll see that some of the issues are, how do you unpack Prince George's County and Baltimore? I've drawn in some of these districts, there's 75% African-American districts, for example, in Prince George's County, that are almost inevitable because they're surrounded by 50 or 60% African-American districts. Second, where are there sort of outside of the Prince George's County, Baltimore, Montgomery area, are there additional, what we call opportunity districts for the House? And so looking down in Wicomico and Dorchester County, where there has historically been a district, as well as up in Frederick and Hartford, where there are those coalition districts. Third and fourth, we got to think seriously, and I look forward to testimony from community members about how to think about the border between Prince George's and Montgomery counties, and particularly with the Latino population, which sort of straddles the border. And then finally, if there is going to be a majority Latino district that you're going to draw, where should it be? Because it can be drawn in Prince George's, but as I said, there are some trade-offs. I'll just note, just so we have it in some formal way, of the adjusted voting age population, this is what the numbers look like. Again, as I mentioned, they do non-Hispanic white, non-Hispanic black, Hispanic. And so you're talking roughly a 50% white voting age adjusted voting age population, roughly 29% black, 10% Hispanic, almost 7% Asian, and the others are below 1%. So that's what we are dealing with. I'll now move over. Let me move this over. And I'll talk, actually, well, maybe I should pause just a second. And if people have questions, before I sort of walk over the map that I've just been experimenting with, it would be interesting to if you have any questions on the slides that I just presented.
Dr. Briselli, I just have a question, or asked you maybe to comment on how the governor's executive order and what we received in terms of guidance, how does that intersect with what you just described?
Great. Actually, I might as well I had some slides on that I didn't even go through. So the governor's order, does, as we said last time, it says that you have to respect natural boundaries and geographic integrity of municipalities and be geographically compact. All of these, of course, are subordinate to federal law, so that the Voting Rights Act will take precedence over them, but they are in tension. And of course, there's the question of how the commission is going to deal with the single-member delegate districts, and the provision in the governor's order that, to the extent possible and consistent with the commission's other duties and responsibilities, that the districts will be divided into single-member delegate districts. So I think that, frankly, the governor's order does not do that much more than what's required by the Maryland constitutional provision here, plus the case law that dealt with in 2002 the splitting of counties. And so this is the relevant part of the Maryland Constitution. It's framed differently than the governor's order, but it's not that far off from, here it says, shall consist of adjoining territory, be compact and substantially equal, and due regard shall be given natural boundaries of political subdivisions. And the governor's order just sort of embellishes that a little bit, saying, it talks about municipal corporations, counties, and other political subdivisions to the extent practicable. And then it says geographically compact. And this is sort of a contiguity requirement. So I don't see the governor's order as doing much else except on the provision dealing with single member delegate districts, because that is certainly not constitutionally required. But the governor has put it in the order.
I guess this might be a fine point, and maybe Judge Williams could weigh in on this. It says shall, not will. So by the use of shall, does that mean that provides us the guidance, but it's not mandatory?
Well, I think it can go either way. People differ on the use of shall versus can or will. I think when you see shall most of the time, Kate, it means mandatory most of the time. But I have seen situations where shall is not quite held to that standard. Some room deviation.
All right, so we're using it as our guidance and what we're going to try to attempt to do. But what I'm hearing, I think, from Professor Briselli is it's not going to be always possible, especially, for example, with the single member delegate districts.
I don't know. I would say that we can do it, but it also depends in part on how strict you're going to be about population equality. And so the map I'm going to show you is plus or minus 4% or a little bit less than that. If you adopt a very strict population equality rule that's more stricter than federal law, that's going to force some other kinds of choices on you. But look, I think that you can comply with each one of these provisions with the Senate map.
All right, thank you.
Professor, I had a question. Could you elaborate a little bit more on the discussion about unpacking PG County and Baltimore City?
Yeah, that was gonna be my question as well.
Great. So the voting, you can dilute the minority vote in several ways, right? You can crack, you can pack, you can stack. Cracking means you take a minority community and let me actually, I think I have on the screen, this is actually the Latino community, but I'll just show what it would look like, just the African-American concentrations here. So you get a sense of the level of segregation. The red areas are majority Black voting VTDs precincts. The green areas, I'll just take off everything except that, just so we can see what we're talking about. I can even take off the districts themselves. So, and I've circulated this map to the heat maps to the council, to the commission. And so, because of the density of the Black population in Baltimore and Prince George's County, under the Voting Rights Act, you need to be concerned if the other components of the Voting Rights Act are there, racially polarized voting and some other requirements that I talked about in the first meeting, then you need to sort of think about where you might gain additional majority Black districts if it is required under the Voting Rights Act. That doesn't mean you have to turn Prince George's County into pizza slices where everything is going out. It might mean that you do it, and I'll show you one solution I've come up with, which is actually not so far from the way the current lines are drawn, but to go in and out of Prince George's County up here into Anne Arundel County, for example. Similarly with Baltimore City, right? Thinking about whether you're going to have a district that goes in from the city to the outlying areas in one way or another. But my point is that if you don't pay attention to race, that you're going to end up creating some of these, really heavily segregated districts. And so it's, just something to think about as we go through it. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Clausen?
Yes, it just seems like it's going to be a challenge, particularly in some areas.
I think you'll find that, look, yeah, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have 75% Black districts in some places. The question is, but you could draw sort of most of the districts in Prince George's County with that kind of percentage. But you'll see when we go through it how you sort of at the edges run into some interesting decisions that you have to make. Okay. Should we go through the map then?
Well, I had a question. William, did that cover your question as well, the answer?
It kind of did. I'm still trying to understand in my mind what the impacts of some of those edge communities would be, borderlining Anne Arundel and Baltimore City and parts of Baltimore County.
Right. And it's, those I think are important questions. And I am not happy with the way the map I'm going to show you necessarily deals with this problem. But I've drawn it just to highlight the decision points that you need to sort of go through as you look at this. And like I said, there are other, if you relax the political subdivision requirement, then there are certain things you can do. For example, jumping over into Montgomery County here, might be easier than creating a district that goes up like this.
Okay, so question for you. When you said earlier about 75% majority, whatever that number was.
Yeah.
Is there a requirement for districts to not be 100%?
So that's a good question. That basically the problem is this: in areas of where the Voting Rights Act applies, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act applies, we are worried about racial vote dilution through two different ways. One is creating districts where the minority community is excessively split, and another where they're excessively concentrated. And so the worry about 100%, say, Black district is that then over the course of the plan, Blacks will be underrepresented because they've been pushed into homogeneous districts. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's why you just have to be aware. And there's nothing inherently problematic about 100% district if you can basically give each racial minority group its due, right? What it sort of is deserves in terms of its size of the population. The concern is that by drawing districts that might be 100% Black, that you're actually minimizing African-American representation throughout the plan.
Now, you mentioned that the Montgomery County could have 8.
Yeah.
Up to 8 legislative districts. What other counties got an increase, and what counties got a decrease in the legislative districts?
Well, I'm not. I can show the changes in population by county, but I don't know. I mean, here's the problem, and I'll just put up the existing Senate maps, right? Because there were so many, you had a lot more sort of creative cartography with the existing maps. It looks to me like Montgomery County actually was fit within its borders with the existing Senate districts. So you had
Presently? They have 8 presently?
Let me just see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. So it was able to do that last time as well.
And is that totally within its jurisdiction?
Yeah.
County?
And you can just see because the blue line is going over the county line here. I want to make sure I'm tracking that, but that does seem right. Yeah.
Yeah, Judge, I put together a table before I started working with the state, and Montgomery County divides out almost exactly even with 8. Prince George's County had 6.92, so they come very close to having 7 entire districts. Baltimore County had 6 and about a quarter. Baltimore City was somewhat of a loser because they lost over 34,000, but that dropped them below 5 district. So they're at 4.46. Anne Arundel is about equal that, 4.43. And then when you get to Howard and Frederick, they were each 2 or 2.5. And then when you get populations in St. Mary's, Wicomico, Cecil, and all of those, the other half of the state, more than half of the state, did not even have enough population for a district of their own and would have to be combined with some others. So that's just a by the number spreadsheet without any deviations, but I can share that later, or maybe Professor Priscilli has some other way of presenting.
No, that's a reasonable way of doing it. But I couldn't find any single county where, except for Montgomery, where it fit perfectly. And so every other county by its numbers must have at least one district that traverses it. There's the second issue, and maybe
I think Frederick may be the only other one that was very close at almost exactly 2 or slightly over 2 districts in Frederick.
Right. Well, you can see
County.
that here because these are almost perfect. The problem is that if you put 2 districts in Frederick, you've got some problem because the Western Maryland counties then get cut off because Frederick's the only way through. So
yeah, and that's why my map had problems back when I was trying to do it. Yeah. But there were a few. It depends on where you want to start. That's
right.
That's always the issue.
So yeah,
everyone's map agrees that Washington County needs to take a bite out of Frederick, at which point the exactly 2 districts, it stops being exactly 2. But
right. And so you can see, and maybe it's worth jumping in right in that area. The blue lines are the existing Senate lines. I'll take those off. But as you can see, I drew 1, 2, 3. These are the 4 counties, and these are the 4 districts. Stopped there. Now, there are trade-offs, and Chair Olson has identified one of them, which is that, for example, if you end at Frederick, there's a town, Mount Airy, which is on the border with Carroll and Frederick County. So that will end up being split because there's a kind of county municipality trade-off there. In addition, there's a question of like, where should the Frederick district go? Should it go south? Should it go west? Some of what this is one of those cities that is a very diverse population. It's roughly half, well, I don't know if the city itself, but this district I've drawn here is roughly half, let me just make sure, get this off here. It's about 57% white, and so non-Hispanic white, and so and it groups together, sizable minority communities around in order to. You won't be able to draw a majority minority Senate district in this area, but you could. Some of the House districts that would contain it would be part of that.
So question: can you pull up the heat map again?
Yeah.
For the Black population.
Yep.
So I'm still trying to understand this 75% rule because I'm trying to understand it.
No, there's no rule. There's no rule. I'm just showing you what happens.
Okay, well, where the 75, with the guidance or whatever the 75% guidance came from, it may not be a rule, but it came from somewhere. So I'm trying to understand, is that just a rule for majority minority counties, or is that the same rule for majority white counties like Queens Anne's or somewhere on the western shore?
I want to be clear. There's no guidance about 75%. That is just what I was just saying, that because of the nature of the demography here, you're going to end up with some districts, if you're inside Prince George's County, that just happen to have that percentage. I'm not recommending that. That's not legally relevant at all. I'm just saying that, as you can see, because of the segregation, unless you were trying to draw in these kind of pizza slice districts, you're going to inevitably get districts, if you draw them on the border with Washington, D.C., several of them are going to be in the 70% plus range. And so that's all I wanted to say. In general, the law, just so we're clear, the only relevant number for the law, and even this is not necessarily a strict rule, is that for purposes of the Voting Rights Act, in areas where the minority can constitute a majority, that is to say over 50% of a potential district, then under certain conditions, you either have to draw that or at least something where minorities will be able to elect their candidate of choice. So take something like the Asian community in Maryland. It is statewide, it's large enough to have more than one district, but it's not compact enough for us to draw a 50% Asian citizen voting age population district, right? And so therefore the Voting Rights Act won't require you to do it. But the Voting Rights Act might require that you try to, in some cases, try to unpack and create more majority or plurality African-American districts in areas where there's so much segregation. So don't fixate on the 75%. That was just what I was going to say. That just happens to be the percentage right now of a district like this. The only thing we should think about is statistically is where are there areas where the minority community is large enough so that it would be over 50% of a potential district. And in those areas, we may have to draw substantial minority districts. Does that make sense?
I'm going to have more questions on that, but we can continue on.
Okay. So let me show you the opposite example. So you see here where you have heavy racial segregation, you have high concentrations, whereas in Dorchester, and this has historically been a majority Black assembly district where you draw and connect these areas together. So here we have a potential risk of packing. Here we have a potential risk of cracking, where if you didn't join these minority communities together, you might end up diluting their vote. And so historically, there's been a district that will go from Salisbury here up through Cambridge up here to create a majority Black district. And so I can say, yeah, go on.
So I guess I'm trying to understand is either you're packing a minority district or you're cracking it. What's the happy medium?
Yeah, that's
is either you're packing everybody into one box or you're diluting their vote.
Well, that's the $1 million question, and that's what our challenge is. And so packing is not a problem if it happens in a few places, but you got to make sure that if you end up packing Black voters, that it's not systematically done throughout the plan. That's why creating districts, for example, that go from northern Prince George's County out, right, to this would be almost just right around 50%, as well as these districts here inside, which are just over 50%, right? That those districts are necessary in order to make sure that African Americans are not underrepresented because of the districts that are more heavily concentrated. But that is the Goldilocks question, which you asked, which is, well, overly packed versus too cracked. That is the challenge of voting rights law, is to try to get that happy medium while at the same time making sure that you're not unduly factoring race into the equation in a way that might violate the Constitution.
Okay, I mean, I'm good for now. I'll have more questions, but I don't want to hold us up because the game starts in an hour. So
okay. All right, yeah, you see, you got the jersey on too. So let me. I'll go quickly through this, and then people can maybe jump back and tell me if there are areas you want me to focus on. So this map was basically drawn with the concern of, it was drawn based off of the congressional map in some ways, the way that you all thought about the regions in the congressional map, and then really aggressively protecting political subdivisions, and then also dealing with some Voting Rights Act considerations that I was sort of looking down the line. But you can see, just to take, I've done through Frederick here, you can see Carroll County has its own district up here, sort of pursuant to the congressional map. Then there's the residuum of Carroll County going into Howard County. Montgomery County, let me just zoom in here a little bit, maybe just make it a little bigger. Montgomery County, basically, and these areas, one thing I want to just highlight to you that I mentioned before. So right now we have the percent African American by by VTD, by precinct on the screen. If we start looking at the combined minority population, you'll see that it gets even more complicated. And so that right? So if you look at these areas that are red, these are majority non-Anglo-white areas. And so you can see a place like Gaithersburg, which didn't in the previous map, the previous heat map looked like it had a substantial minority population. It actually does, but it's several different minorities at once. And so I think it's useful to look at this. I don't want to suggest that the Voting Rights Act requires that you draw majority non-white districts. That's not the requirement of the Voting Rights Act. But when minority groups might be working in coalition with one another, it may be relevant. And we can go into the deep dive of the Voting Rights Act in that. But I wanted to at least show you that when we start thinking about aggregated minority groups, right, that then the picture is even more complicated in different parts of the state. All right. I'll take back. Well, and that's why, as I mentioned with Frederick, if you look at Frederick, the areas that are contained in Fredericksville here and then going down, right, are all 20% or more minority. And so I'll just remove this, but happy to go back and show that again. And so Montgomery County basically has put in, a district that is Gaithersburg, a district that is Rockville, a district that is sort of the west of Wisconsin Avenue, Potomac in that area. And then one, and I'm not so sure if this is the right way to do it, Chevy Chase through Silver Spring and Tacoma Park. This allows for this district, which is District 13, has a substantial, really gathers most of the Latino community in this area in one district. It doesn't go as far as Rockville, which has also substantial Latino population. It's only 37% though Latino, and so that's something to think about, especially as you also think about these other areas of opportunity. But as you'll note, and as we mentioned before, we've got several. All the districts are within Montgomery County. In Prince George's County,
Professor,
yeah.
if I could ask a question. In number 13, that district, did you put it together primary interest on the community and municipality and places, or did you look at the racial and ethnic background of those voting districts when you put it together?
So you'll see it obeys what it does. It actually does not break any city lines, so that it does obey. As you'll see, Tacoma Park, right, is not in it, and these other areas. So there are no municipalities that are in it, and so it is. I won't say that it is predominantly drawn on race, because that would be unconstitutional, but that it was through an attempt to make sure that the Latino population in this area is not unnecessarily divided up. And so I guess one of the ways to put it is that I drew the maps first without looking at race. And then I said, well, what does this do violence to certain communities by dividing them up unnecessarily? And this one did. And so with some minor adjustments, I could draw, this district, which is a pretty compact district. It is, just to be clear though, so I have it on the screen, it is 37% Hispanic VAP. So it's not a majority Hispanic district, but it is majority minority. It's almost 70, it's about 70% minority. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think that's the approach I was looking at as well, not looking at the statistics of the results until after the voting districts were pulled together into a compact.
Right. And just to be clear, also, I should make that almost all of these districts are drawn just on the basis of full precincts, right? I say almost all because there's some stuff that dealing with contiguity and the water in Baltimore that where I broke up like precincts that had no people in them. But but something like this, it's just, if you have funny shapes, you'll notice it's because of the way the precincts are drawn. Also, I'm not sure, this is the kind of thing where it would be useful to get like public comment. You know, I know this area relatively well, having my mother lived there for many years. And the sort of Chevy Chase north on Wisconsin Avenue, you know, that makes sense, but should Silver Spring and Tacoma Park be joined in here, or should it be with these other communities here, right? Reasonable people can disagree about that. It's certainly, you know, because of the shape of the bite that Washington, D.C. takes out of Maryland, it ends up, you know, creating this horseshoe character to it. But those are the kinds of things that I think through public comment and through the commissioner's own expertise could be useful to get feedback on. And we can also, you know, all of this stuff could be smoothed out. I'm sorry, Walter, did someone have a question? No. All right. So Prince George's County, you'll note that, that it only has one traversal. So Prince George's County is kept completely whole except for this one last district that goes here. District 33 is also a compact plurality Latino district. Plurality, but not majority, going along. It's just sort of going right along the west or northwestern part of Prince George's County. You'll notice how difficult it is to respect political subdivision lines like these, right? These are crazy shaped municipalities. And so it's difficult to both respect Hyattsville and University Park and College Park, for instance. But the districts try to do as good a job as possible. In fact, let me broaden this up so it's clear. I think that should do it. Maybe a little more. So trying to get all of College Park in this one area here, all of Hyattsville, I believe, well, with the exception of this little area. Well, I'm not even sure that that's part of Hyattsville. You'll see Hyattsville sort of discontiguous, all in this District 34 here. Greenbelt, which is up here. There are some, New Carrollton is kept whole in here, Glen Arden here. And then, you know, this district is sort of a buoy-based district inside Prince George's County. Some of the areas right close to DC are in this area here, going east-west. This, I'm not thrilled about the shape of this area right here. I think I would want to do some more work on that. And then the Morningside and Forest Heights are in this district along the as it approaches the coast here, and then all of the remainder of Prince George's County is just down here, and so it does not split and does not join with Charles County, which is something that we did in the congressional map. This is also a majority African American district in Charles County. And that can be drawn in a relatively compact way. You have to have one traversal into St. Mary's. Charles and St. Mary's together are more than two districts. And so they have to lose some population, and that can be done right here. But all of Calvert County is kept together in this plan, and then Anne Arundel County parts of Anne Arundel County are added. Then there's sort of an Annapolis-based district here. One that's, you know, Anne Arundel County, responding to the concerns about excessive splits, has 3 full districts that are inside Anne Arundel County in this plan, right? And then parts of 3 others, right? But there are at least 3 full districts that are there. I mentioned the one area that we really do, a lot sort of crashes together in the middle of the map because of pressures from the outlying areas. And so thinking about how you deal with Laurel and whether you draw a district like this, and this goes back to Commissioner Thomas's question about unpacking and the like. This is a district which is roughly 50% African American, and it's because it joins some African American areas in Prince George's County with some outlying areas. Baltimore, there are lots of decisions that need to be made when it comes to Baltimore. And those of you who are residents of it, I think are in a better position than I am. You'll note that in this map, I kept every district inside Baltimore except one that goes into Anne Arundel County, because that's what we did in the congressional map. But every one of these, and each one of these, except for District 25, 21, 2, 3, and 4 are all over 50% African American. And then District 25 is there. You could probably draw one more African American district if you decided to break up the city of Baltimore in a different way. Similarly, you'll notice that Baltimore County. So while there's one district which is traversing the Baltimore City Anne Arundel border, there is also only one district that is traversing the Hartford Baltimore County border here in the north. And so this is a hard barrier here, which actually has real implications for the plan. If we said, hey, you can go in and out of Baltimore County and don't have to obey this border, you can do a lot more in terms of these districts. And so you'll see it's basically, going sort of in a pizza sort of fashion with both of these. But that you do have one other way to do this is this is the way the congressional map existing lines do, is to maybe do the traversal in southern Baltimore County. So you group these sort of areas along the water instead of doing it up in the rural area here, which would then push these districts up to the top. But again, to some extent, it depends on community of interest considerations with Hartford, whether the areas here along the water you feel should be with these areas in southern Baltimore County.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
About Baltimore City and the 5% deviation, because
Right.
between District 21 and 22, it's over 5%. Are we going to narrow that down, or is that currently how it's listed? Or are we doing 5% from zero either way? Because
It's
how's that
10, it's
working?
10% is the total allowable deviation. And so each one of these numbers you'll see is below 5% or below or less than negative 5%. So both of these are perfectly constitutional. If either one of these was over 5%, then we might have problems. But this is only 3.42% over, and this is 2.73%. But one of the things we might do, right, is when you see something like this, when I see something like this, I say, well, why don't I just, let's take one precinct from District 22 and put it in there. Let's see what that does. And so then District 21 will be negative 1.87%. You'll bring this down almost a percentage point. And so that's what I mean about refining it to deal with population variances once you have the basics of the map. But at this stage, I would just keep it at plus or minus 5%, because you might want to completely redo these districts. In fact, I want to urge you to think aggressively about, and do not anchor your expectations based on this map, because I think there are a lot of problems and challenges with it. And actually what's happening in Baltimore is one of the more challenging areas. And so thinking about, whether the district should be coming in from Hartford down here, or whether you want, instead of joining Baltimore City, parts of Baltimore City with Anne Arundel County, maybe to have it go out in this direction. I think that, and look, we don't need to do it on the fly like we did last week, but just give me some marching orders as a scenario you would like me to run. And then I'll draw that map, and then we can go from there. All right, so the way that this district was drawn was to get Bel Air, the city of Bel Air, in with the other parts of southern Hartford, but that can be changed. And I've seen maps that just put Bel Air up into the northern area here. Did someone have a question?
I did. Could you layer on the racial composition like you did with the maps?
Yeah. So let me do that now, and I'll show you what went into this. So as you can see, so just to identify the majority black districts, you've got 23, 22, 21, and 24 that are majority black. 25 is, I believe, just roughly 39% on the adjusted population. 15 is also 69% black. So this is also a heavily concentrated area. 17 is not. 17 is it's majority minority, but it's only 32% black. So as you start thinking about effective representation, right? If you see that once you obey this boundary here of Baltimore County, and that this district doesn't go in and out, that you know presents serious constraints. And so you know, it's just something to think about. Like, so this is a 39% black district in 25. 17 is a 32% black district. But if you could join the outlying areas here, so that you had something from going from Anne Arundel into Baltimore County, and then one of these districts going in, and that would probably create an additional black district. Again, you know, these are all compact districts that respect political, that to the most extent respect political subdivision lines, and it's really just you know, up to you all about how you think, based on your experience living in these areas, what you think is the most natural way to represent these communities. But each of these districts is in the kind of 50% range. I'll just say 21. So is 59%, 22 is 56.69%, 23 is 53.94, right? 24 is 52.48.
What about 20 and 19?
Say that again?
What about 20 and 19?
So 20 is 17% black and 19 is 26% black. Yeah, so once you get out, unless you go into west, you know, go west, there's not as substantial population. Then, of course, you know, in southern Baltimore City, there's that's what makes these 55% and not 75% districts.
Does that layer in? Can we look at Hispanic?
Yeah. So you see this pretty much kept together, the Hispanic community in Eastern Baltimore, right? And just, you know, kept it all in this District 23. The other areas don't have substantial populations. And I did see, by the way, something in chat, and I want to correct myself or further embellish, which is that I mentioned the citizenship issue. I mentioned in the context of Hispanic political opportunity, but obviously the citizenship issues affect all groups. And in fact, it affects sometimes you know, there's sometimes are situations where you have a district that's, say, 40% African American, that when you start looking at the citizen voting age population, it ends up being over 50%. And so it does cut both ways. Sometimes it reduces the percentage of a group, and sometimes it ends up increasing it.
Dr. Priscilli, can you just go back to that 23 where you have accomplished some concentration of a Latino or Hispanic, but what is the actual percentage in that? Like, it may still be a majority black, like you said, 50-something%.
Yeah, it's 53%, almost 54% black. It's about 12% Latino.
Okay, so that's the 12. I wasn't sure which column it was because I couldn't see the
yeah.
The label on
I'll
that.
give all of this. I'll spruce it up for everybody so you can see.
No, okay, I got it. So that's the column I care about. Okay, I was curious.
I mean, but what I think, you know, for transparency purposes, we obviously have to make this map public. I am concerned that it's going to be seen as anchoring the commission. I mean, I'm just as happy if we go through like we did with the congressional map and just start in a particular corner and then just start drawing districts. But I did want, this is the way I learned about what the kind of considerations were, and where the points of tension were. And so I wanted to just convey that to the commission with something tangible.
Also, I would throw in that 4 Senate maps have been submitted by the public, and I've only had a short time to glance at them, but I think they have some good ideas in them, and each one treats Baltimore differently. For example, each one treats Montgomery somewhat differently, and we may find if we look at those submissions that a light bulb will go on about a better way of handling one of these issues.
And I think they do. So one of the things about those maps, which I think is important, and does it offer kind of options for you, is that, as you're saying, they don't necessarily obey the county lines as strictly as I am here, right? These are districts that are pretty aggressive about saying, all right, there's only one district that is going over the Baltimore City boundary, right? There's only one district that's going over the Baltimore County boundary. But if you start having 2 districts, and same thing with Prince George's, right? And then there are none that go over Montgomery County. And so if you relax that a bit, it opens up all kinds of possibilities. And this is something that we should have a conversation about. I'll just say, because I don't want to delay either football or anything else tonight. I want to just highlight the issue that I mentioned before, that this district down here has historically supported one African American assembly district. And so what looks like, it's a split of Salisbury, but that is a consequence of that ambition of that having those districts. You cannot, I tried figuring out a way to, if there was some combination of counties that would support like a perfect number of districts, and I could not find that. And so Caroline County is split here. Wicomico is also, and then Cecil is split up there. And that is it. Why don't I stop sharing and see if there are any questions?
We didn't spend a lot of time on Howard County. That's an interesting county. I know Kate probably has a number of questions there, but we can do that later. But I'm interested in that county also.
Well, so let me say about Howard, which is that basically Howard has one full district in the sort of central Howard, and then it has, because of where it is, and this is the story in a lot of these plans, because Montgomery County provides a kind of floor, Frederick County provides this kind of wall over here because we ended at districts there, then you have no place, unless it's going to go into Baltimore County. You've got this half district, or it's actually probably 75% of the district. You got this district, which is fully in Howard. And then you've got two parts of districts. This is the majority minority district that is extending from Laurel into Howard and Anne Arundel. And then you've got this district, which goes from Anne Arundel into Howard.
Am I right that District 26 there does a pretty good job of taking in the Columbia Association plus Ellicott City, which are certainly very cohesive communities, even if they're not incorporated?
I can call that up. Let me, I'll take the voting district off, and so it basically gets all of Columbia. Ellicott City is broken here, and that's something that we.
It gets the downtown areas and not some of the outlying suburban areas.
I mean, one of the problems as we think about political subdivisions, so what I have on the screen right now, these lines are what is known as census designated places. Some of those can be cities, some of them are not. The green, though, I talked to the Maryland Planning Office, or no, I think it was the Elections Office. I said, I want to make sure I know where the city boundaries are. And so that's what the green cities, right, were provided by the state of Maryland. These are just the way the census has designated communities. And I can tell you, we dealt with this with the Prince George's redistricting 10 years ago, a lot of these census designated places don't really reflect the borders as members of that community view them. And so it's something just to think about and I don't know, maybe Commissioner Chair Hetherington can speak to this, right? Does this accurately capture Columbia? Does this actually, capture what the way people think about Ellicott City? Is it just kind of a general?
Well, typically Ellicott City and Howard are joined. And so pulling part of Ellicott City out of the Columbia area probably would be something we would want to rethink.
And so that's the kind of thing, we could experiment with. They may be too big to support. So, we could try to like take out these areas. That's only 5% of it. or that would, that's only 3,000 people. So it looks to me like Columbia and Ellicott City, one of them is going to have to be split. But we could, we could figure out whether those are the right borders there.
How many senatorial districts does Howard County have now? 2, Kate?
Yes.
I can tell you,
I think.
exactly here.
Okay.
Population wise, it would be about 2.5.
Yeah,
2.5
sounds right.
Yeah, 3.
Well, you've got these kind of crazy shapes going in.
Yeah, some of them cross over into other areas. Like
as I see it, there's only one.
Baltimore County.
Yeah.
Baltimore City, rather.
There's only one that's fully within Howard, and that's this State Senate District 13, it looks like. And then you've got State Senate District 12 that goes across into Baltimore County.
Baltimore County, yes, that's right. And then we also have one that goes into Carroll County.
Yeah, right, that one there.
That's the third one.
District 9, yeah. But you can see how crazy, I mean, just to highlight this district here, right, which is, not the kind of thing usually a commission would draw, but right, that's the current district there.
Yeah,
so,
that one is very odd looking.
yeah. And it goes, it's just 2 counties. It's just county, but it goes up and around.
It's an eagle holding a spray can. You can see the spray coming out of the can.
Right.
I don't know who the eagle is trying to spray, but
I thought it could be. Yeah, there's a lot of things.
Yes,
a megaphone,
like a Rorschach test.
Yeah. So yeah, that's Howard County. If there are any other counties you want me to talk more deeply about.
And then the one in Howard County, that is that section of Western Howard County that's aligned with Carroll for the senatorial district, probably makes sense.
Well, this is another, this is again how we think about the with the congressional map, like where there are any number of ways to skin this cat, right? So, well, let me say that the Frederick, depending on what you do with Frederick County, right? If you keep this border sacrosanct, right? The Carroll County residual district has only 2 places it can go. It can go either into Baltimore or it can go into Howard. And so in this one, it goes into Howard, because I was trying just to break the Baltimore County boundary once.
I think I agree with Kate that the connections between Western Howard and Southern Carroll are very close. It's I do believe that they feel a lot of identification with each other's
Thai agriculture area.
Yeah.
Walter, is there a minority, an identifiable minority community in Washington County which has supported that minority delegate up there?
I don't think the population is large enough to do that, but I yield to Professor Berselli, who might have that information.
Were you talking about Washington County there?
Is there a majority district, one delegate in Hagerstown? I don't think there is, but.
So, all right, so this is an interesting question, and I was looking at this. And let me put up the
general principle of not splitting Hagerstown is going to get you in that direction anyway. I just don't think that it winds up with the numbers for a minority majority. But you want to have one delegate district centered on Hagerstown.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. So here's what it looks like. So we can do this quickly, and I can tell you if it's gonna, it doesn't, you'll notice there aren't that many red areas. So that means each one of these things that I'm adding here is actually minority. And so this is about what an assembly district would look like. This ends up being still about 2/3 white. And that's sort of what I just did on the fly.
Sure. Understood. Understood.
Yeah. But as Walter was saying, right, this plan does respect the borders of Hagerstown. So it doesn't unnecessarily like split up the minority population in Hagerstown. And again, this is a pretty diverse minority population in here. Just to give you a sense, I mean, if you're interested, right, we can, I can look at each one of these districts. And so something like this, just that little red area, it's,
okay.
You can see that it's 77% white. Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, that's the Senate district. It's a district.
All right.
Anyway, I can show it later, but that this is got basically 707 blacks out of 1,500 population, and then these other areas are going to be more diverse.
All right.
Do you think we still have to have, I mean, we're kind of getting to this without being explicit about it, but about what our criteria are, what we value, where we like to go. I mean, I think what we've heard is that we want to keep counties as much as possible, when we're doing the congressional, as much as possible intact. We probably have some decisions that we've come to tonight based on how we would define the senatorial, or, you know, what we prefer to see in the senatorial districts. But it'd probably be best, I think, for us to have a conversation, and maybe that's a conversation we start off tomorrow about, so we can try and use that as guidelines, realizing that they're guidelines, but they're going to have to be not always the thing we adhere to based on certain variables, whether that's the numbers that can't be met. For example, what I just told you about Howard County. You always think of Ellicott City, Columbia together, but the numbers wouldn't allow something like that to happen. So then you have to make exceptions. But I think it's important for us to hear from all the commissioners about what's important and see if there's concurrence as we move forward, because we're getting to the point soon where we have to be drawing maps.
Is this a good time to start that conversation, or should we plan for tomorrow?
Well, maybe, you know, and I know I'm looking at William, who's saying, please don't do it tonight. I'm looking at that thought cloud, and I can see it. I can actually see that thought cloud. So perhaps that would be when we're thinking about it, we have time to digest this, sleep on it, or maybe watch the game and then sleep on it. That's how we begin our conversation tomorrow. But I really appreciate what Dr. Purcelli has done as far as giving us things to think about, because that helps us say, well, what is it? What's the most important things that we're going to try and hold on to, and realize we can't do it in all situations.
Also, if people want to email me tonight with any scenarios they want me to run, like to redo Baltimore City, Baltimore County, because I think there's a lot of different, it's one of these things where there are so many possibilities that I just was, you know, I didn't know which one to put on the page. But I can do dozens of them if people are interested. So please send me any requests.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that offer.
Back to the criteria, if it would be possible for the professor to pull together those criteria items from the presentations he's made and add two of the other ones, for instance, the 5% deviation, and those for us to look at in a group, you know, just as a thought piece before tomorrow, that would be useful.
Okay.
Any other comments? I sense that we're close to wrapping up, but requests, things we should note to discuss tomorrow? Hearing
Well,
none.
since we have the public listening, I just would continue to, and Kristen, I think, has done this, and all of us have done it, just encourage people to submit their maps. We do read everything. We are looking at it. It's going to help influence our recommendations, even in establishing the criteria. So please, whatever we can get from the public would be appreciated. I see Cheryl's hand is raised now. Cheryl?
I know you brought up something for us to discuss in terms of people seeing some of the questions or comments related to the maps that come up. Since it's something that we have to consider while we're able to look at them, people may be able to see someone else's thoughts and have another thought they could share with us in terms of feedback. We don't have much longer, you know, in terms of right now. We have one more, right, tomorrow before we continue. So just a consideration for the chat in terms of whether or not they can see it. And if we see there's an issue, we could pull back then. But just a thought, just to make sure that public and open really does mean that we can see each other's thoughts and help us spur more thoughts from that. So just a consideration.
If I could say just one thing in response to some stuff I'm seeing in the chat, which is that because this is often jarring for people who have never been part of a redistricting process about sort of the overcorrection or the focusing on race. So I would just want to, for the public to understand that this is in part what the federal law requires, is that the reason the census releases data in this format and has the racial data is because of the Voting Rights Act. And so as we go through this, it's not that racial considerations are placed above all considerations in every instance. It's saying that there are legal requirements that the commission has to comply with, and several of them are implicated by the racial composition of different communities.
And of course, before we start getting serious about maps, I'd like to hear from from Gloria with reference to her thoughts again on the Hispanic Latino community. We gotta consider that. It's very important.
Gloria is scheduled to address us on the 20th, which I believe is 1 week from tonight.
Okay, that's Monday. That's Monday.
That's right. She's doing a presentation, I believe.
She'll be doing a presentation. One possibility is that we might want to put in some work on areas of the map that are not as implicated in some of the questions that she's going to be talking about. Those areas in central Maryland that present a number of difficult questions, including how to handle heavily Hispanic populations. We might just save them until after Monday.
Okay.
And
right.
you know, one other thing for the professor, if there's any process suggestions you can give us that would help, where maybe they're not as controversial, or we don't have as many considerations, where maybe we could get those kind of, I don't want to say out of the way, but you know what I mean? They're easier to do if we can do that, so we can have these really important conversations about the ones that are more complex. And that's where I think we're going to have more of the back and forth. But if there's ones that are kind of straightforward and, you know, recommendations on those, we can kind of, it would help, because we have a lot of work to do and we don't have a whole lot of time.
Well, I would also encourage, for a reason that Chair Olson mentioned before, which is that looking at the public submissions on the Senate, because now you've seen one example,
right?
But there are some others there and how they did it, and so it really doesn't take very long you can see how they dealt with Baltimore, for example. And if you think that that's a better way to do it, then I think that would be good to incorporate.
No, that's one other thing, Chair Olson, about the process. We're going to be at points in time where we're going to have to vote on, is this the way we want to go? And, you know, of course, you have to have certain numbers. We talked about that for quorum, but that will help us try and solidify the parts that we can, and then move on to other parts.
Could I put in a request, and I think everyone should feel free to make the same kind of request, which is some of the plans that we see in our file of plans, some of them for state senate don't have any blow-ups that are enabling us to examine detail in the crowded parts of the state, like Baltimore. So it becomes very hard to see what's actually going on in Baltimore. Is it possible to get close-up detail maps for particularly those, the couple of Senate maps that don't currently have them? That would let us do that comparison across all 4 maps of what's happening in Baltimore City, for example.
I believe they because you have the JSON files, that they can be loaded into the Maptitude portal that you have, so that then you could zoom in and out.
Okay.
But I don't know how the staff is dealing with that. Is Commissioner Clausen, you're shaking your head, is that not possible?
It is possible. I just don't think it's been done yet. I think that PDF is there, and it does list the files that JSON and other files that are available, but I don't think they've been meshed into Maptitude yet, but that would be up to someone at the state to comment on.
Are there other comments? Okay. We are, I think, half an hour from game time. Hearing no other comments, would this be a good place to wrap up for the evening?
This is Kristen. I'm having some technological issues with my screen this evening. And just a reminder that tomorrow's meeting does begin at 6 o'clock. Once again, if we have any updates, whether they be emails or additional maps that have been processed, I will send them out to everyone. And we will start it at 6 o'clock tomorrow. Just let me know if you have made a decision as to having that chat feature be live for everyone. I will attempt to go in and change that if you would like me to. If not, we certainly can do that for future meetings. But is there a decision on that?
Well, is anyone opposed to that? If no one's opposed to it, we can go ahead and do it now.
Okay.
Just a question.
Right, I will try to activate that. Go ahead.
I was going to say, can we somehow delete or obsolete any comments that you deem inappropriate?
It doesn't let us get rid of the message. It doesn't let us delete it like quickly, and it just keeps going. So that's the issue at hand.
In one instance where commenter was making extremely inappropriate comments, I think that commenter was thrown out, but even then the comments were not deleted. They were just left there.
Correct.
Yeah, my preference, because we were able to view all of them right after the meeting, it's a bit distracting.
Very much.
Because it's like, you know, well, let me just put it this way. We see a lot of repeats. And so if I can view them without being distracted from the conversation, my feeling is I'd rather just look at them afterwards. I read, we had 81 the other night. 81 comments. I read every single one of them. Mm-hmm. So I don't have to be in live time for it. So
we certainly can post the comments. We certainly can post the chat feature along with the meeting. So people would have the transcript, the video, as well as the chat. We certainly could do that. Or we can just have the chat be live, and we would still send it out to everybody after the meeting anyway.
I'd like to try. I'd like to try it in real time and see what happens. And then if it gets to be a problem or people are self-promoting themselves or some inappropriate, then we just cut it back off. Yeah. But let's try it. Let's try it.
Okay, if we do that, I just would ask the public to be mindful, you know, about inappropriateness on the chat.
I have a question. I'm just trying to clarify, what is the difference between what we're currently doing and a live chat? I thought it is live. I usually see the comments scrolling through.
We can, but they...
Oh, they can't see amongst themselves.
Yeah, so we're still saying everything.
Just wanted to clarify. I wasn't sure what was the distinction that we were making.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct. we can send messages to everyone, but
Yeah.
members of the public can't send a message to all members of the chat, which also then kind of allows the situation not to happen where people are kind of going after each other in the chat, which we also have seen.
Yeah.
in the
I think
past
that's
as
what
well.
we're seeing a lot of, people going after each other in the chat.
Yeah, we don't want to see that reacting.
Yeah. Well, I think, Judge, maybe we try it again, see what happens. Maybe, as they say in Howard County, people will choose civility. We'll see.
That sounds good. Well, I will see if I can make that change in the platform so that that feature will be enabled tomorrow, and we can move forward in that way. Also want to remind everybody that we do a lot of social media promotion for these meetings. Please share it on your own social media if you are active in social media, whether it be Facebook or Twitter, to share those redistricting. It's our redistricting Twitter account, which I've sent to everyone, our Facebook account, as well as the Maryland Department of Planning. We post them there as well. We do send out, as I mentioned in an earlier email, we do send out the notification of these meetings to about 46,000 different contacts. That includes the press corps. It includes all elected officials, federal, state, and local elected officials that we send that to. We send it to the Maryland Association of Counties, the Maryland Municipal League. So we send it far and wide, and that also goes to the listserv that we've put together of anyone who ever said, yes, please send me information on the 2020 census, as well as those who have signed up to receive redistricting information. So these meetings are being promoted far and wide, social media, through that listserv, which again is being sent to elected officials, and of course we ask them to share it on their social media, and several of them do. Several elected officials will go and share, whether it's the redistricting pages or the Maryland Department of Planning social media pages, and they will share that information about the meetings. They'll share the flyer that we post. So I would ask you all to share it in as many ways as possible as well, and we can send you some separate flyers, but they're also all on our social media accounts as well.
Thank you, Kristen. Any other comments before we close it out for this evening? Okay, hearing none. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So
Adjourn.
Second? Okay, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, we are adjourned till tomorrow.
Thank
See you then.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good
Good
night.
luck, Ravens. Hi, guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Commission.